Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is your host, Kyle Buller, joined with Michelle Janikian and our guest, Benjamin Mudge. You may remember Benjamin from one of our previous episodes. So I really encourage everybody to go back, check out Solidarity Friday, episode 59. That is the part one of this conversation where Benjamin gets more into his story and his work. And this is kind of like the part two. We invited Benjamin back to really dig into some of these topics a little bit more in depth. Again, that is Solidarity Friday, episode 59. I'll read a little bit here from that episode from Benjamin's bio. So Benjamin Mudge has a background in music, art, and political activism and is now a Ph.D. candidate in the psychiatry department at Flinders University, as well as the director of bipolar disorder research and education, CIC. He taught himself the science of bipolar disorder while working at neuroscience laboratories in GlaxoSmithKline to be able to manage his own personal experience of manic depression. After psychiatrists prescribed him 17 different pharmaceuticals, all which were problematic, he gave up on pharmaceutical psychiatry and decided to find his own solution to living with manic depression. He's been managing his bipolar disorder with ayahuasca for 12 years without any need of pharmaceuticals, and was awarded a Ph.D. scholarship to research whether his personal protocol could assist other bipolar people. His future vision is to make ayahuasca ceremonies available to bipolar people as an alternative treatment to pharmaceutical drugs. Yeah, I know this is kind of a controversial subject of bipolar and ayahuasca. We have a blog as well. If you go to our website with the blog, you can find that article as well. Yeah, Michelle wrote that one. And Benjamin was featured in it. You know, we got a lot of great responses from Benjamin's first episode and the blog. But, you know, I also just want to make a little disclaimer here after reading Benjamin's bio, that, you know, if you are struggling with bipolar or any other sort of mental health disorder, it's okay to get treatment. Medication's okay if it helps you. And finding some of these other alternatives really important. Ayahuasca and other psychedelics aren't going to work for everybody. So, you know, it is important to kind of follow what works for you. And if medication has been super helpful for you, continue to follow that if that's, you know, what you need. And I guess just a little background, like I did work with people with early episode psychosis, and the place that I was working at, we weren't, you know, anti-psychiatry. The whole premise of that place was to really be with people while they were going through their experience. And, you know, some people were able to manage and move through their experience and get out on the other side without the help of medication. And other people did really they wanted it. They felt better with it. So, you know, just wanted to make that little note there after reading his bio that, hey, if you're struggling, it's okay to reach out for traditional support. And yeah, it's okay if medication is something that you're oriented to. I know it's kind of an interesting topic within the psychedelic field, because we're all kind of trying to find an alternative way and move away from some of those models, but just also really highlighting the importance of that as well. Yeah, and I guess just to one point, when I think about some of these issues of like maybe moving away from traditional treatments because we don't trust these systems and institutions, or we put a lot of belief in some alternative healing modalities and afraid to maybe seek out other forms of treatment or help, I'm always thinking about the episode from James Jesso podcast, Adventures Through the Mind, What Happened to Tobias. Really, really kind of shaking story there. Kind of shook me up, and a lot of emotions when I first listened to that episode. So again, you know, I know we're all kind of fighting to change this system, and we want something healthier to some degree, right? I know a lot of people on medications, a lot of different issues arising, as Benjamin's saying here, all problematic. And yeah, we want to fight for something different, right? We really want to, or we need new tools in psychiatry, and it would be awesome to move away from some of them. But yeah, just a reminder that, you know, sometimes people need them, and that's totally okay. So a reminder that we have our Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course coming up. That will start on September 23rd. You can sign up and check out more information at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. Check out some of our other classes over there. We have some free ones, and then have some other paid classes. The Jung and Psychedelics class with Johanna Hale, our Shadow series class that I did with Dr. Ido Cohen. And we also have some other ones in the pipeline. So excited to get those out as well coming this fall. Just stay tuned. We'll keep you posted. If you want to support us here at Psychedelics Today, you can do so at patreon.com/Psychedelics Today. That's leave a small monthly donation, or I think you can do one-time payments on there. Helps us out. Best way to support the show is to subscribe and also to share any of the posts. Share a podcast with your friend, retweet something on Instagram, and just get the word out there. So I hope everybody enjoys this episode with Benjamin Mudge. I know I did, learned a ton. Benjamin's doing some really, really awesome work here, and just really excited to see how his career unfolds and his Ph.D. research. So thanks again, Benjamin, and hope to have you on again. And everybody enjoy this episode. We'll catch you on the other side. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Psychedelics Today. Kyle Buller, Michelle Janekian, and Benjamin Mudge coming back at you for part 2. Maybe if you want to go back into our archive and check out Solidarity Friday, episode 59 with Benjamin, check that out, because this is a continuation of our conversation. We felt like there's a lot left to be talked about, and wanted to invite Benjamin back on to really kind of dig into this taboo topic, but also a very important topic. So we're really thankful for your time, Benjamin, so we can dig into this a little bit more, exploring psychedelics and bipolar disorder. So welcome to the show. Glad to have you back.
Thank you so much, Kyle, Michelle, and also Joe. I really appreciate this opportunity. This is something I'm totally passionate about, because literally ayahuasca sacred traditions have saved my life from really severe bipolar disorder, manic depression, and that I've lived with my whole life. And, now I'm at a point where you could even say I'm post-bipolar, and I'm really wanting to share the innovation and share the whole set and setting protocol that I've been developing over recent years with as many bipolar people as possible, if they want to go down this path. It's not an easy path. It's not take a pill and all your problems disappear. It's quite a complicated thing and a very challenging thing emotionally and spiritually, but it's been incredibly beneficial for me, and not only in terms of my mental health, but I've got my creativity back, which is something that I lost completely when I was taking psychiatric pharmaceutical pills. So yeah, I feel really optimistic, and I want to share this.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. I'm really glad that, we made this chance to continue this conversation. And I think just in case folks haven't heard the first episode, we do encourage them to go back. But do you want to, before we dive into the conversation, just quickly reintroduce yourself to ground everyone, and then we can move on from there?
Sure. So Benjamin Mudge, I'm doing a PhD in the psychiatry department at Flinders University in Australia, although I live in England doing my research over here. I'm also director of the Bipolar Disorder Community Interest Company, which is a not-for-profit organization doing advocacy work and research work. And my background is in music, art, and activism, basically. Although I have, my mother was a professor of neurobiology, and I have a lot of, I find it very easy to absorb technical information. I was taught a lot of neurobiology by her, and so I've gone into. But basically, what I did is I was a patient in the psychiatric system for many years, and I was given 17 different pharmaceutical drugs. They all had problems. I quit psychiatry, tried to figure out my own path, discovered ayahuasca, and have been off pharmaceuticals for 15 years, and then developing this special brew of ayahuasca, a unique cooking technique and also a unique set and setting protocol for ayahuasca to be able to work for bipolar people, which is something that's generally considered as contraindicated, but I've figured out how to make it work really well. Yeah.
Excellent. No, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. I think it'll be helpful.
So today, what I'd really like to share is, this is a lot of this is not going to make much sense if you haven't listened to the previous episode. So I do encourage you to do that first. But basically, if we start from the assumption that I have got an innovative protocol that can be beneficial for bipolar people. Now, I know that's not demonstrated as a scientific fact yet, but if you could just imagine that this was true, then the next question is, how can I get that out to as many bipolar people as possible? How to make it accessible on scale? And this is something I've been thinking about for many years. So back in the day, it was originally just me and my own little cooking technique living in Byron Bay. And I realized I could just, go to the beach, collect the disability support pension and drink my ayahuasca and play my guitar, and I would have a really happy life. But, I really realized, because I have so much compassion for other bipolar people, what they're going through, the horrors of manic depression, the horrors of suicidal ideation, and the horrors of the pharmaceutical drugs that are currently being prescribed by psychiatry. And they're so terrible, really. Yeah. I just can't begin to explain, especially in terms of numbing out emotion, spirituality, and creativity and libido and stuff like this. So I just wanted to share what I'd found, what I'd discovered. And, in gratitude to it all felt like a, divine cosmic alignment that I ended up with this. So I wanted to share this, So I've been thinking about this for many years, and I've been thinking about the possible avenues to share this on scale. And that's what I really want to talk about today, and the practical issues, but also the philosophical and political issues that are involved in this question, in these various options that I've been contemplating. So the first option that I was thinking of was to roll this out through the Santo Daime religion. So Santo Daime is a very widespread ayahuasca religion that's a hybrid between the indigenous spirituality of Brazil and folk Christianity, you could say. So it has this real community service mentality, as a lot of Christian religions do, charity work. Now that is great because it fulfills the first requirement of this to be able to be accessible to bipolar people. It needs to be financially accessible. And quite frankly, a lot of the majority of the ayahuasca ceremonies are not financially accessible to the average bipolar person who is usually incapable of holding down a full-time job and therefore, just can't afford it, right? So, that was the main thing that attracted me to the Daime, and also this whole concept of working with integrity, and organizational structure. So an organizational structure is another very important thing. If you're going to roll out a protocol, you need to be able to communicate through some kind of a network efficiently and so on. Now, there are some other requirements which I'll spell out about, what it would take for an ayahuasca ceremony to work for bipolar people, as well as financial accessibility in the organization. There needs to be a specific brewing technique. So the ayahuasca would need to be cooked in a particular way. And another thing is the ayahuasca cannot contain alcohol at the time that it's drunk. So most ayahuasca is cooked, and then usually it ferments. Unless there's something done about it very carefully to prevent it from fermenting, then it will ferment over time and become alcoholic ayahuasca, or you could say ayahuasca beer, right? And so there's two ways around this. One is to prevent that by either condensing it down so that there's no fermentation, or even freeze drying it, or bottling it as the UDV do. They put it in these cans and they They basically bottle it with no air in that, and that prevents the fermentation. Or it could be that it does ferment, does create alcohol, and then you just evaporate the alcohol off just before the ceremony. So that is a good option. But this is something that's really important for bipolar people. And then another really important thing is that there are no psychoactive substances apart from the ayahuasca ingested by the bipolar person at the same time. So that means, the reason for this is because the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, MAOIs, in the ayahuasca vine are very chemically reactive. So they chemically react with alcohol, THC from marijuana, and caffeine and tobacco from either smoking or hape, snuff, but also, things like frankincense, incense,
wow,
and even chocolate. These things all chemically react. So it has to be really clear with that. Now, this is where I basically gave up on rolling out through the Daime model, is because there's something that I want to say. This is a really controversial issue, and it's a really sensitive issue as well. And I say this as someone who is incredibly pro-cannabis and who used to be a medical marijuana patient at one point with a chronic pain syndrome. But there is a chemical interaction between ayahuasca and THC in marijuana, cannabis sativa. So, and there is also a very widespread use of cannabis sativa, which they call Santa Maria, in one branch of, the biggest branch of the Santo Daime religion. And that has emerged since the 1980s. So going back to the 1920s, when Mestre Ineo started the Santo Daime, up to when he died in 1971, he was very clear. He said, never mix ayahuasca with marijuana because of this interaction. And if you ask any of the the people that I consider the real experts in the ayahuasca traditions who've got these culturally intact traditions, so for example, the Shipibo, the Ashaninka, the Yawanawa, any of the Taitas from Colombia, they all say, do not mix these two plants at the same time. There's nothing wrong with marijuana. It's a medicinal plant. It's an entheogen and all that sort of stuff. But chemically, they interact.
Yeah.
Or in some, they sometimes they say the plant spirits are in conflict. Yeah. Depends how but they don't work together. And also, if you ask the UDV, they feel the same. And if you certainly ask the original Santo Daime people, they feel the same. And what's happened since the 1980s is cannabis has been introduced through the Padrino Sebastian lineage, and that has become very widespread use. So my recommendation is that it's not safe for bipolar people to go to Santo Daime churches to drink ayahuasca there, unless that particular church has an explicit no cannabis, no Santa Maria policy at that church. So they're not going to be like passive smoking cannabis at that time. There's another question of, whether it really is possible for any ceremony facilitator to be drinking ayahuasca and be stoned at the same time and take care of people in a ceremony. And I think that's not possible really. But anyway.
Could I just quickly ask Benjamin, could you just talk a little bit about, what is the risk there? Like, why is Santa Maria extra dangerous or maybe not a good mix in this situation for a bipolar person?
Okay. So, and
I know this could probably be its own podcast. So just I
know. Okay. So basically, bipolar people have brain chemistry that's easily destabilized in various directions. So it can be easily triggered into overstimulation, into depression, into paranoia, and into psychosis and so on. So THC is dopaminergic, which means it amplifies the dopamine system. And we know that excessive use of THC can induce paranoia and sometimes psychosis. Now, when the monoamine oxidase inhibitors are in the system at the same time, they make that tendency a lot stronger.
Ah, okay.
Right? So the MAOI plus THC combination can just massively over-exaggerate the dopaminergic system to the point of psychosis. And there's something that's this is a bit of an unspoken shadow that I'm just going to name because I think it's important for the community to be honest about. So in the absolute worst case scenario, there's actually been 4 murders around the world in the last 10 years or so in which not the ayahuasca and not just the marijuana, but the combination of the two of those together has been in the bloodstream of the murderers who were in a drug-induced psychosis state when they perpetrated the act of murder. So, and that combination has been implicated, has been certainly brought into question by several people. And this is, this is why this is a bit of a hot topic in the ayahuasca community. Yeah. So I just, in that situation, please avoid it. Bipolar people, that combination.
Yeah, no, thank you for going into that. I appreciate it.
And I really say again, blessings to Santa Maria and the spirit of cannabis, and blessings to all of the medicinal cannabis users, and freedom to you all. And I really support the industry. And this is just a technical health and safety point that I'm making here. That's all.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. So I realized that path of like rolling out through the Standardization religion was not really going to work. And there's a situation in which there's a few situations when I tried to raise the issue of the cannabis, or wherever I raised the issue of fermented ayahuasca and fixing that. Then I had this situation where, because I was such a junior fardado, as in a really, really low level novice in the hierarchy of the Santo Daime, that my opinions were dismissed, basically. So, and that's a bit of a theme of the day that I'll talk about in amongst, these avenues that I'm exploring. Okay, so the next idea was, go and do a Ph.D. in a psychiatry department and try and do a little clinical trial as a Ph.D. and prove this can work, and hopefully, and roll it out through psychiatry, through university trials around the world and so on. And I went to, I got a scholarship thanks to my supervisor, Dr. Hale Strobel, and embarked on this PhD program. And, I've made a lot of progress there, and I've developed my theories. Are much, much more sophisticated now, much more nuanced. And also I've got a lot more data. It used to be an N=1 experiment, and now it's an N=65 quantitative data. Wow. I've got 65 people's testimonies, basically. So that is, that's all good. But I was completely naive about the possibility of doing a clinical trial, as in giving anyone any ayahuasca in a PhD. That's just simply not possible without a really big structure of a whole department behind it. So, my friend, Dr. Chris, he's just got his PhD, Dr. Chris Timmerman, he's been able to give DMT to people at Imperial College, but this is with a whole lab environment that's all geared towards that, and where he had a team, and he had the whole department behind him, and they had, ethics approval and all the rest of it. So I simply did not have that, and I just have not been able to do any actual clinical work. All I've been able to do is the preclinical investigations. So that's all right, making progress. Then what do I do so the next step would be to do what's called a postdoctoral study, which is after I got my PhD, go to one of the research institutions where they have a more structure for doing psychedelic research, and they actually have the laboratory rooms and facilities and the team and the security, and then the possession license for Class A substances, and most importantly of all, they can get the ethics approval, and they have senior academics who are ideologically behind the research.
So important, right?
Absolutely. So that was the next thing I was looking at. Now, the obvious place to go is to King's College London and the Maudsley Hospital, which are basically merged. And turns out that back between 2001 and 2006, my clinical psychiatrist was Professor Alan Young, and he's the leading expert in bipolar disorder in psychiatry in the United Kingdom. And he is now behind ayahuasca research. So he's got his name on 2 papers where the main researcher is Dr. Simon Raphael, who's a good friend of mine. And he's philosophically behind ayahuasca, working as an antidepressant, and he's interested in it working for bipolar people, perhaps. So that would be the obvious thing. Now, however, I haven't actually really talked to him since 2006, but the last time I spoke to him was at the time when I came off the pills that he had prescribed me because of the side effects, and I was trying to find another route, and he was trying to convince me that there was no alternate viable option that could work apart from the pharmaceutical pills, and that I should get back onto the pills. And I hung up the phone on him. So I don't know whether that's I don't know how it's going to go when I communicate with him. I don't know whether he's going to be able to take me seriously as a former patient. Maybe once I got my Ph.D., then he could take me seriously. I hope so. So that's fantastic as a possibility. If it could happen at the Maudsley Hospital, it's the most influential place for psychiatry in the United Kingdom. And if something was rolled out through the Maudsley, it would have massive scope for implementation to a wide population of people in the future. So that would be huge, and it would have a prestige sort of reputation that flowed around the world. So that would be amazing.
Right. Like if it was Harvard Medical School or something in America, right? Yeah, that's how I'm thinking of it. Cool.
Exactly. And then there are some other options that are really quite viable. So there's people at UCSF who are working with ayahuasca in a medicalized, standardized way and doing some trials. She knows who I am.
Molly, right?
Well, there's Molly. No, they're doing the psilocybin trials.
Oh, is there ayahuasca trials underway? Or
there's some ayahuasca trials that are being conducted by postdoctoral woman at UCSF. Sorry, I forgot her name. Now, then there's some other things that are going on that are really interesting in the US. So you've got the work of Dr. Leanna Standish. So she took over stewardship of the McKenna Brothers plantation of ayahuasca vines in Hawaii. And she's been...
Oh, wow.
So she's been cultivating in a really systematic way these ayahuasca vines that were imported from Peru to Hawaii. They're grown in an old growth forest. They're standardized and verified and all this sort of thing, vouchered. And she's been working towards getting this approved, getting ayahuasca approved through the FDA. And what's really important for doing this is standardization. So ayahuasca is a highly variable medicine, right? Depends on which vine you use, how much vine to leaf you put in the pot, how hot you cook it, and how long you cook it. All these factors they change the outcomes of the at least 4 psychoactive ingredients in the tea. So you've got harmine, harmaline, tetrahydroharmine, and DMT. And those ratios are highly variable depending on the cooking technique. So what Dr. Standish has been doing is developing a cooking technique and a harvesting technique that will produce a standardized product, a standardized medicine, so that it's got almost exactly the same amount of those 4 ingredients in every bottle. And so she's got these she's got a lab, she's got these cooking machines, shredding machines, and always using clones of the same vine and all this sort of stuff. So standardization, she's figured out, is absolute genius work. And her strategy of cooking it in a particular way is very, very much in line with my strategy of, my need, my requirement of it being cooked in a particular way for the tea to come out with the right balance of those ingredients in order to be able to have the balanced effect on bipolar brain chemistry, right? So she would be an absolutely ideal person to collaborate with. And I did meet her at the World Ayahuasca Conference, and I will be approaching her soon to talk about this. However, there's something. So her cooking technique, my prediction about her cooking technique is that the medicine that she's making is actually not quite going to work for bipolar people based on the limited amount of information I've had for what her recipe is. And that's because she's using the community standard understanding of those molecular ingredients and how they work. And there is a norm about basically, harmine and DMT being key to it all. And it's a theory. All I can say in truth is it's a theory, but I honestly believe that I've worked out something that the community as a whole does not get yet. And that's about how the other ingredients, harmine and tetrahydroharmine, play a crucial role in the brew. And, I'm aware that it's a very arrogant thing for a guy without a Ph.D., who hasn't even got a neuroscience or pharmacology degree to talk about. But, this is what I believe I've figured out. And, I have talked to a lot of pages from the Amazon, and I have cooked ayahuasca dozens of times myself, and I've been drinking it for 15 years. So that's my background, if you see what I'm saying. So anyway, her strategy is fantastic, but it would need to be adjusted to work for bipolar people. And I don't know whether, her work is complicated enough. It's taken her 20 years to get this far. I don't know whether she'd be willing to adjust her recipe at this stage, or whether anyone is going to even take on the whole bipolar controversy anyway.
But just the fact that she has a process for standardizing is useful, I guess, is how I keep thinking about it, right? And you could perhaps borrow from that to make a standard version that is maybe less triggering to the bipolar mind. Is that kind of what you're saying? or could that be a possibility?
If she's got her process going on and she doesn't really want to adjust that because she's on a roll, then I would hope that she would share. Her team would share their information with me, and I could clone it and
interesting,
and adopt it with my own recipe, basically. And that would be fantastic, and I'd be really grateful. So now Dr. Standish is collaborating with Dr. Victoria Hale, who has a background in the pharmaceutical industry and innovation and so on, and they've started a hybrid for-profit and not-for-profit company called Sacred Medicines. And so they're trying to, get ayahuasca out through the FDA and make it as accessible as possible. And, as I say, it's a hybrid profit, not-for-profit to strike a balance between the needs of actually getting the job done, getting investment to get it happening and, as soon as possible, but also make it accessible. So that's great. Now, then, of course, there's MAPS. So I've been talking to some senior people at MAPS in the last 3 or 4 years, and 3 senior people from MAPS have all expressed to me that they want to do something for bipolar people in the near future. They don't know what, and they're aware that it's controversial, and they've got more than enough on their plate to just get the MDMA, step number 1, done. But they want to do it, and they want to do something. So I'm going to be talking. I already am talking to them, and I'll be approaching them with a proposal. And I love their ideology of making medicine as financially accessible as possible and using it. They also have a hybrid not-for-profit, for-profit community benefit company, and that's what's it called? Yeah, community benefit company.
Public Benefit Corp or something like that.
Cool,
but
yeah. Yep. Okay. So those are postdoctoral possibilities. However, there's there's some limitations here. So there's some limitations in the clinical trial method itself, which, if you look at, for example, the paper that was done by Professor Draulio Giarrugia and Fernanda Poliano Fontes, I think is her name, and their team in Brazil, and the work by Professor Luis Fernando Toffoli, for example. Okay, in order to get those papers published and to get the ethics for those approved, they had to strip out basically most of the spirituality from the experiments.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the extent to which it was a sacred ceremony, the paper that was published that was the first phase 3 clinical trial, which demonstrated that ayahuasca works as an antidepressant for treatment-resistant depressed people. Groundbreaking paper. But the only really sacred element in there was some MP3s on headphones from a UDV ceremony. So this UDV supplied the tea, and they used the same bottle of tea in the whole thing, in all the different experiments. And there were some headphones, and they're just in a pretty bare room. Now, it was beneficial. A lot of the people, quite frankly, were homeless people who hadn't had a decent night's sleep in a nice, comfortable bed and a shower and a shave and some love, because they actually got love and compassion and care from the scientists. So those are spiritual elements. But for example, I was talking to Dr. Simon Raffel about, we were talking about the possibility of doing clinical trials at Maudsley, and he was saying, yeah, but we couldn't even burn Palo Santo incense in the Maudsley Hospital, for example. So, and what about psychiatry is biased against spirituality. So in terms of sacred songs, to me, sacred songs have the prayers in the sacred songs have meaning and have consequences, right? So, what is invoked in those songs has a tangible effect on the people in the ceremony that are listening to them. And it's all there in that moment. And things like sacred space, what kind of environment are you in? What has been going on in that environment? Is it in a church, or is it in a forest, or is it in a lab, in a pub, in what's been going on there? People feel those things. And, ritual and protection prayers, and as I said, incense and all these things, in my experience, all have tangible outcomes for the therapeutic benefit of the people in drinking the ayahuasca at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a paper that was put out a little bit ago about that, actually. I think we chatted about it on one of our previous episodes, going into some of the ritualistic aspects of ayahuasca ceremonies and how they play a role. Really interesting, from the songs to the purging to, just the group environment and everything. These are things that I think we definitely have to look at. But, I think if you're coming from the, trying to do clinical trials and the science, how do you tease out all those? It's way too many variables, right? What's actually working at times.
That's right. And these papers have to actually get published if they're going to have any impact. And having all these extra variables makes it potentially too complicated to get anything published. So I'm not really criticizing the people at Johns Hopkins or the people at Imperial College, because they've made massive progress for the whole community by basically playing a reductionist game and getting some results and getting those published. And this is groundbreaking. And thank you very much to all those. But is that really what I want to put my bipolar people through? A reductionist trial? Because I want to be, if I'm facilitating a ceremony for them. So I've been, by the way, I've been training to be an ayahuasca ceremonies facilitator since 2008. And, firstly in the Standardization tradition, but more recently with the indigenous traditions of Brazil, like the Huniquin, the Iwanawa, the Ashaninka, and also some Shipibo maestros and so on. And, I'm going to go to Colombia and so on. I take this very seriously, and I take not only the chemistry of it, but also the spirituality and, the protection prayers. And then questions of like, well, what happens if someone gets beset by a demon in the middle of a ceremony? How could a psychiatrist ever handle that? Right?
It's a good point. It's true. It's very true. Something we
these
have
are the questions we ask
thinking
too.
and talking about. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, it needs a page. So anyway, what I'm envisaging is a genuinely sacred ceremony that somehow is scientifically measurable. Yeah.
Or at least standardized, right?
Standardized and structured in a way that could go through an academic study, but that there was actually zero compromise on the essential sacred elements to make it spiritually health and safety in spiritual terms, as well as in three-dimensional terms. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So,
so where does that leave you? So what are you thinking then?
Okay.
Right? Like that's a lot to try to swallow and figure out, I feel like.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to try with the people that are, the people that have already got something up and rolling and they've got the institutional structure and have got the funding, and they've got the ethics, right? They've got the ethics departments, ethics committees, and credibility and all these things. I'm going to approach all the ones that are possible. But, as I said, at the moment, bipolar disorder, there is a community belief, which is, as I said in the last podcast, is functioning less as a scientific fact and more like a cultural taboo. And that is that ayahuasca, that bipolar people and psychedelics in general are contraindicated. And therefore, it's going to be very difficult to convince any of these universities with their reputation or any of these institutions with a reputation and funding, massive funding bodies required and so on, to take on such a controversial topic as ayahuasca for bipolar, right? So if that's not going to work, well, the next possibility is to just do my own clinical trial through my own not-for-profit community interest company, right? Bipolar Disorder CIC. So if I could use that as an organizational structure and a funding conduit, then maybe I could just run the ceremony on my own terms with all the sacred elements and all the health and safety and the brewing technique and all that sort of stuff. Just do it myself and, pay a team of people to put that on. And I do have someone from Berkeley University who is interested in doing the basically getting the ethics through Berkeley University and then coming and doing the scientific observation study on these ceremonies that will be published through Berkeley. And that would be really important because I can't pay him. My company cannot pay him his wages to do the thing. He needs to be financially independent in order to be scientifically objective. Do you see what I mean?
Ah, right. Yeah.
Right.
It's science for profit. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, quite frankly, I think is more, I kind of have a better feeling about that. in terms of it, what's gonna work, but more importantly, it's when it's going to work, right? So Dr. Simon Raffel, again, he was saying, we were talking about this just last week, and he said it's going to take. They're trying to put ethics for ayahuasca through the Maudsley at the moment for just standard unipolar depression, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to take 5 years to do the study, 5 years, another 5 years for it to get any like clinical outcomes, i.e. anyone, be able to actually access the medicine as a patient for, there's 10 years. And that's before we've even started contemplating the ethics of bipolar people participating in these studies. So then I'm talking about 15 years before I get a result, right? I'm 49 years old. I've been working on my PhD for too long already. I've had, as I said, of the roughly 100 bipolar people who've reached out for me saying, I'm desperate, I'm suicidal, please give me some of the medicine that's in your fridge. And I've been turning them away because of my position at a university and what's considered ethical by the university. And how many is it now? Is it 5? Have died from suicide in that while I've been doing my PhD.
Jeez.
And
I know. I'm so sorry.
I'm like, I am not willing to wait 15 years before I even start, right?
Yeah.
And particularly because I'm so confident that it can work, right? If done properly, I'm so confident it can work. So if I do it through my own organization, it will be done faster. Less people will die from suicide. More people can be helped, and it could before I die, before I get too old to do any work. I would want this to be up and rolling as a protocol that can be widely spread, right? So that's another option. But then the drawback of that one, or the complications of that one, is getting whether I could in fact get the funding, whether I could in fact get the ethics, and what do I do about the legal situation? That's another one, right? So
yes, very real.
right. So okay, so these are further complications, and as I said, ironically, I feel like, in terms of academia and in terms of the community, I feel like I am, what I say is taboo, and I'm struggling against, instead of getting the support that I think this deserves, I think I'm getting patchy. I'm getting mixed responses, quite frankly. Some people, like notably ICEERS, who are the people that run the World Ayahuasca Conference and the Ayahuasca Defense Fund, they just went, wow, and, have supported me. The people at Breaking Convention in London, that conference, they've supported me. Quite notably, other conferences, they just don't want to know. And then I'll tell you a few anecdotes, right, when I was starting. So
please, always.
So when I first started my PhD, one very senior academic in the ayahuasca world, I was going to present at a conference, and that academic was going to present at the same conference. And the night before the conference started, they tried to get me to stop from making my presentation altogether before they'd heard any of my theory or any of my data. And they'd said it's just too controversial, and you can't say that. I said, I'm not even trying to say that. I'm saying this is my research, right? I'm not drawing conclusions. But they said you can't even bring that into question because ayahuasca is so fragile in its time. Now, that was 5 years ago, I think. And no, that was like 6 years ago, actually.
Okay.
Unfortunately, my PhD has taken so bloody long because two things have happened. My mum passed away and I had a head injury. So I basically lost like 3 years there's been a gap where I didn't make any progress. And now I'm trying to catch up on lost time. But anyway, that was like 6 years ago. And they did, the good thing is that ayahuasca has become a lot more in the mainstream, a lot more accepted. So that's good.
A lot has happened in the last 6 years, right?
Yeah, I know. It's fantastic.
World,
it's fantastic. But not with the bipolar thing. Has made
true.
Zero
we
progress.
Haven't really destigmatized bipolar disorder, just ayahuasca. No, yeah.
So another thing was at the Breaking Convention conference in 2015, I was speaking, and I went up to another senior academic in the ayahuasca world, and I showed that person the my abstract in the program, and that academic did not realize that I was talking about myself. And I said, have you seen this? Have you seen this? And he read it. He read the abstract, and he said, so a bipolar person thinks that he's worked out a treatment for bipolar disorder himself, and he thinks it's ayahuasca? Well, that sounds like a grandiose delusion, doesn't it?
So insulting.
Right, he didn't realize it was me that I was talking to.
Still, well, I'm almost glad he didn't realize, because why would you say that anyway, mate? Like, come on. Like, I'm better.
Well, this person is a professor of psychiatry.
That's the attitude, though, right? Yeah. That's
the attitude of superiority between the psychiatrists and the patients.
I know.
Right? It's very general, right? Now, I will say that that same professor came to Breaking Convention 2017, having forgotten about all this. And then he came to my talk, and he stood up at the end of the talk, and he said, well, and now I've actually heard all of your data and heard your theories. I congratulate you. I think this is really progressive work, and I think you make sense. And the other regional academic is the first one I referred to, is also backing my work.
That is great.
So that's good if you get the data. But, and I've had a lot of in the corridor, behind the scenes, pats on the back from, some senior academics in the psychedelics and ayahuasca communities and some, people at MAPS, and I'm going to name names, a lot of, sort of unofficial encouragement.
Yeah.
But where we're at right now is absolutely no one, apart from my supervision panel, has put their name or the name of their institution on a piece of paper alongside my name. See what I'm saying? So no one's brave enough to take an actual official stance of like, actually, we're backing this dude. Right. And that's, that would be nice. What can I say? That would be nice.
It helps with authority, right? I mean, it helps with so much when you have support. I understand. And I also just want to jump in and tell listeners that you can watch both of Benjamin's Breaking Conventions talks on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. I know I've watched them online, so you can go back and look for those. Just a little aside. Please continue.
Yeah, and the easiest way to watch all my YouTubes is to go to my website, which is bipolardisorder.me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all in there. And by the way, it's not about me. It's about us, right? So it's the website is going to be is becoming a resource for bipolar people to self-diagnose and to empower ourselves and discuss consciousness raising in the spirit of feminism and Black liberation, consciousness raising and developing our own resources and protocols and so on. Amongst ourselves, independent of psychiatrists and the pharmaceutical industry. So that's why, what it's called.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'll also say that, we did, part of the reason Benjamin came on the show for the first part of this talk was it was the 1 year anniversary since I wrote an article on this topic, and Benjamin was one of my main sources. And we really dive a lot into the stigma behind bipolar disorder and like why that might be halting some of the research, and just being open about these kinds of conversations, both in that article and our previous podcast. So if folks are more interested in diving into some of that content, we have provided it in in the other resources. I do want to, ask you, so like Benjamin, what are some other, maybe like we're going into some of the options of like how you're seeing this to play out quite a bit. And there's this other option that gets a little bit of press sometimes, this idea of like pharmawaska or maybe like a synthetic pill. Have you given any thought to that and how maybe that could help the bipolar community, or maybe it's not enough? Or what do you think about this pharmawaska idea?
Right. Well, so pharmawaska is the nickname for a synthetic pharmaceutical pill that is inspired by ayahuasca, i.e. that has DMT and harmine and perhaps some other of the molecular ingredients from ayahuasca all bundled together into one synthetic pill. Now, okay, I'm going to give a bit of an overview of what's going on in that field already. So in the UK, there's a company called Small Pharma Incorporated, which is collaborating with Imperial College, with the people that did the DMT research, and they're making DMT in a synthetic form and doing a trial for clinical depression with that, so synthesized DMT. And, which is very similar to synthesized psilocybin from the magic mushrooms and the progress. And with only one ingredient, it makes it easier to study and easier to get through the FDA and so on. And I think it'll, that could be really beneficial. That's great. But I don't think it's going to work as well as ayahuasca because it's missing at least 3 other components,
right? Harmine,
and tetrahydroharmine, which in my opinion all do something helpful.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, MAOIs and serotonin reuptake inhibitors are known to have antidepressant value. They're known to generate neurogenesis. And, it's missing those if it's just the DMT. Now, similar thing can be said about Dr. Milan Scheidegger, I think his name is, from the University of Zurich. Sorry if I got your name wrong. So they have been developing a pharmawaska pill, but it only contains DMT and harmine, right? And so I'm saying it's missing these other things.
Right. Okay.
And I will be talking to them and I'll be telling them I think they're making a mistake, but I don't know if they're going to listen to me, whether they haven't got a PhD and who the hell am I anyway, but hopefully they will. But they're on a roll with their project, right? So I don't think either of those are going to work for bipolar people because I think that they won't have the balancing effect that is required for bipolar brains.
And do you know it, would this be like a full dose, or is it more of a microdose? And then there's no ceremony in sacred containers if you're just taking a pill every day. This doesn't seem like, I don't understand how this works in a way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So those trials that are being conducted by those two labs, basically, they're quite similar to the MAPS MDMA for PTSD model.
Okay.
So whereas you get a big dose in a short period of time with a couple of psychotherapists observing you, health and safety in a lab, some headphones, not much sacred ceremony, but you do get some psychotherapy. And, that's their model. It's not a takeaway thing because it's Class A restricted substance.
Oh, of course. I guess I misunderstood. Yeah.
Right. Now, this does, but the concept in terms of therapeutic value for bipolar people, the basic concept is a really good one. If we're just talking about the bipolar people's interests, I'm going to come in a minute. I'm going to talk about what about the indigenous people's interests, right? Which is another question. But if we're just for the moment talking about bipolar people's interests, then it was actually Professor Louis Fernando Toffoli that said to me for the first time after he saw my talk at the World Ayahuasca Conference, and he said, because he was toying with the idea of developing pharmawaska himself at one point. He's dropped it since then, but he was thinking about it. And he said to me, of all the people, all the treatment indications that you could use pharmawaska for, that my protocol was best suited for pharmawaska because I have to have a very specific ratio of the ingredients, and really you can put absolutely precise amount of milligrams of each of those 4 ingredients in a pill quite easily in a pharmaceutical lab, right? In a factory, right? That can be done. So it was his idea, first of all. And my immediate reaction as someone who like through the Santo Daime, we treat ayahuasca as a sacrament.
Yeah. As
something incredibly sacred, and like you actually pray to the tea itself, right? It's like, and you sing to the tea and you smudge the tea, and it's considered that all the energy goes into it. There's a ritualistic cooking process and all this stuff. So, that's my background, and I believe in that. And it's not just an indoctrination, it's something I really believe in.
Yeah.
So the thought of pharmawaska, my initial reaction was, this is sacrilegious. This is like really obnoxious pharmaceutical bastardry, biopiracy, and so on. And I was really put off by that as an initial concept. But then I thought about it while drinking ayahuasca in sacred ceremony and just contemplated it from that perspective. And I've talked to a few people, including my friend Dr. Simon Fell, and, basically come to the conclusion that a pharmaceutical pill inspired by ayahuasca is not going to be anywhere near as good as ayahuasca itself. It's going to be missing some of the plants. It's going to be missing some of the plant ingredients. It's going to be missing the plant's spirit and intelligence. It's going to be missing the sacred ceremony and so on. But if it were on the market as a prescription option, it would be infinitely better than Prozac, Seroquel, and all these things that are currently available for bipolar people. So in terms of doing something that was mass producible, it really is a way to scale and get to help a lot of people, even if not perfectly, to help a lot of people some of the way to healing. And that could be run through the FDA and so on. Now, so in a lot of ways, I think it's actually really worthwhile idea for the interests of bipolar people. And the other thing that I think is really relevant to share is that in my own healing journey, so I went for the first 5 years, I was only accessing ayahuasca in a sacred ceremony. So I'd either wait until I could find a Santo Daime church or wait until a shaman came to town. And then, I had the money and then I would go to a ceremony. So it might be like months in between the ceremonies that I could have access and that I could afford to go. And I'd feel great for 2 to 4 weeks after the ceremony. And then my depression and my paranoia would gradually slide down. So I wouldn't have withdrawal as such, because it's just that the symptoms would come back.
Yeah.
Starting from 2 to 4 weeks downwards. And then I'd basically be suicidal after 2 months or 3 months, right? Again. And then what I did is, this is again guided by the ayahuasca, is to start microdosing in between. So, but what I call actually not the kind of, Silicon Valley corporate take a microdose of LSD and go to the office kind of at 9 a.m. kind of deal. But do what I call micro ceremony, which is have prayer, intention, phone off, sacred space, incense, sacred music, and prayer in a like a 2-hour ceremony, and doing that at night before going to sleep. And when I started doing that in between the big doses in the big ceremonies, then my life turned around. And I actually had a much more sustainable mental health and was able to do this PhD.
Do you mind me asking how often these mini ceremonies were necessary for your mental health?
Well,
or just what your routine ended up being more. Perhaps,
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So the conclusion that I have is, I think it's much better to do it at night, when at the end of the responsibilities, and then go to sleep and then the effects wear off before getting up in the morning and doing some exercise, having some protein, and before turning your phone back on and the stresses kick in, in the morning. So
it's good advice.
Nighttime's better. And then, having had either just soup or juice for dinner, for example, that's important. And then the dose is roughly about 1/8 of what I would take in a normal ceremony.
Okay.
Right. So it doesn't have to be much. So we're talking about, might be like a teaspoon or a tablespoon, depending on the concentration of the tea. This really does not have to be much. And now this is what's really important is to not have a psychedelic dose, right? So the dose where you break through into the spirit realm and therefore you're vulnerable to demons, right? Do not have that much.
Yeah.
It's significantly less than that. The dose where you break through into the subconscious realms where your buried trauma is, do not have that much because there's no one to support you freaking out, remembering what happened when you were a kid, right?
Right.
So just having a really small dose, and so there's no visions or none of that. But the good news is that the dose that's necessary to have an antidepressant effect from ayahuasca is lower than the dose that is required to have a psychedelic effect from ayahuasca. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're teaching me something new.
Right?
Yeah, interesting.
And which is similar, by the way, with medical cannabis. So the dose that's required to have an analgesic effect from medical cannabis is lower than the dose that's required to get stoned.
Yeah.
Or to get high.
Yeah.
Right? So, that basically is that. And then, and doing it with an altar, it doesn't have to be it can be whatever your deities that you vibe with on your altar, that's fine. But some kind of shanti, sacred music, some intention, some prayer, some smudging, and no one knocking at the door.
Yeah.
No one going to hassle you. No phones, this sort of thing. So no communication, no responsibility. But all you just do is meditate and listen to the music and say some prayers and maybe have a little cry. But
That's probably what
trip
happened
out.
to me. But it sounds beautiful.
Yeah. But don't trip out. Because there's no one to support you.
And were you engaging once a month or how often?
Okay. So what I was, the year where I really, really turned my mental health around, I was doing that between once every fortnight and once every month. And I did that for that year. And that turned me around. Now, and this is what I wish I had been doing in the last year, but I just happened to have had a very chaotic, uprooted few years where I have not had what I call a sacred ceremony, a sacred space,
right?
A set and setting where it was appropriate for me to drink ayahuasca. So I'm just well, here I have these paintings on the wall, and I'm going to be microdosing or micro-ceremonying in this room pretty soon. There's some building work been going on today, and I'm nearly done, and then I'm going to be get back to that as a spiritual practice and a medication regime simultaneously.
I don't
and
need to
we'll
laugh.
see.
It's beautiful. I'm very happy for you. That's the only.
Just to be able to get back on. So I'm going to be following my own protocol. Gracias a Dios. I'm this is about to happen pretty soon, and I'm really happy about that. And then I'm gonna finish my PhD. No worries. So now to do that for people, really, the only way to do that with whole plant ayahuasca is to lyophilize it, to freeze dry the ayahuasca. And so if I were to say I was helping a whole, dozens of bipolar people, then they came and did a clinical trial, and then they had take home little squidgy, kind of like a chewing gum, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
Like a chewing gum of freeze-dried ayahuasca.
Yeah.
Cool. That was dosed out it had the right ingredients, and then it had all the water taken out of it, so it could not ferment and become
see.
alcoholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a specific dose. So freeze-dried, like little bowl, candy bowls or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, toffee. No, toffee. They're more like a toffee,
like
right?
a little toffee, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I thought of that. Hint, hint. Anyone want to buy my not-for-profit community interest company a lyophilizer freeze dryer machine? Go to my website, make a donation, please. Anyway, that's possible. And then I think they would then add just a teeny bit of water, heat it up over a candle, smudge it, drink it.
Wow.
Right? That's how that could work. Right?
Wow. Cool.
Right. Or you figure out how many milligrams of these ingredients are there and you put it in the pill. Right. And then that could go. So what I'm saying is like there's these major like brain chemistry restructurings that have in a high dose contained therapeutic setting, whether it's a ceremony setting or something like the MDMA, the MAPS protocol, right? But then what do you do in the meantime? And a pharmaceutical pill was inspired by ayahuasca, contained those same ingredients, could be used as what's called in psychiatry a maintenance medication.
Right.
Right. So every psychiatrist says to every bipolar person, you need to take pills for the rest of your life. Right?
Yeah.
And actually, I agree with them. But I'm saying these could be freeze-dried ayahuasca or it could be pharmawaska pills. Doesn't have to be Seroquel. It doesn't have to be something that numbs your creativity and your spirituality and your libido.
It doesn't have to be every day. Even if it's the rest of your life, it sounds like this could be a once a month, bi-weekly, depending on what's needed by the person at the time thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's how depressed they are at the time.
Right.
Really. It's kind of like, but what's clear is that ayahuasca has an afterglow.
Yes.
Right? And so that afterglow works for like 1 or 2 weeks. So doing this like once a week is what, once a week or once every 2 weeks, that is a pretty ideal way to go, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does not have to be much, really.
So interesting.
But but this is putting the power in the hands of the patient.
Which could be beneficial in like a more psychological way, giving people back their agency, right? And just like their own power and because a lot of times this process with psychiatry for the bipolar person can take that away, I feel like. And so this could be like a double, like a twofer, it could give people both the neurobiological ingredients that they need and this sense of like caring for themselves and having their own agency and power back that in combination with some spiritual elements, I could see being so helpful to so many people, with the right intention and education behind it, I feel. It sounds like, I'm very excited for this. So what's next in your thinking then, Benjamin? Like, okay, where do you go from
hang
here?
On, but hang on a minute.
Please.
I got to say, so there's complications
to this.
Problematic
so even though that
things
sounds
with the whole
great, then what could be?
Yeah. So the concept of pharmawaska. So there's an organization called Synergia Alliance, who are they're like they're a for-profit pharmaceutical company that is basically partnering with the University of Zurich with the pharmawaska pill, and they're also partnering with a psilocybin manufacturer, they're partnering with an iboga manufacturer, they're partnering with ketamine manufacturer, and so on. So they're forming an alliance that's basically bringing in, these are good people, definitely good people who are bringing, the vision is to really bring the psychedelics forward and make them accessible. And what they're doing is they're pledging to give 10% of their realized profits every year to institutions which basically where the money goes to indigenous cultures where these things where the medicines came from, and for ecosystem preservation, right?
Which is so important.
So So compared to Compass Pathways, who are giving, as far as I'm aware, 0%, this Synergy Alliance giving 10% is really progressive and really generous, right? And so I've talked to someone from there, one of the co-founders, and, that's a possible avenue. My first kind of activist background kind of question is, why only 10%? That does not seem like a lot, and I'm someone who's been all the way up the Jordão River in Brazil with the Huniquin tribe and has seen they don't even have clean water. I've seen the kind of poverty levels that they're living in. And you've got the Colombia and Brazil especially, there's, an active government policy of genocide against indigenous populations. So this is the extreme situation they're in. And they're pretty cynical about biopiracy because, they look at what happened with the Mazatec Indians in Mexico and magic mushrooms and psilocybin. And now there's multi-billion-dollar companies profiting out of psilocybin and zero going to the Mazatec. So my friends in the indigenous tribes are like, well, are we actually going to get any of this?
Yeah.
Are we going to starve to death? Are we going to get killed by Bolsonaro? Or,
our language will go extinct. Our medicinal knowledge will go extinct. We were just talking about this on another podcast. Yeah, without support. Yeah. And yet we're talking about solving Western mental illness. Does it even really matter when they need help right now?
Yeah. So, there is the bipolar people are also a really desperate and life-threatened population. So but I don't see why it can't be win-win, really. I mean, it's, if it's just done right with some ethics. So anyway, that's an option that I'm exploring.
Cool.
And then there's also, for example, SciTech, who are another company that I've spoken to. And I've spoken to, they're, a psychedelic startup as well. And then there's Numinous in Canada, who I've spoken to as well. Now, what is so these for-profit companies, now the advantage that they've got over the universities is because they're not risking some kind of academic status reputation, right? So they don't care about the taboo, right? So the for-profit companies care about the profit margin. Now, to put this in perspective, in the United States every year, there's in excess of $200 billion spent on on bipolar people's mental health, right?
I didn't know that stat, but it makes sense. Yeah.
Now obviously a lot of that's going to the big pharma. A lot of that's going to psychiatrists who, in the US, the average salary for a psychiatrist is $233,000 per year, right? And just got to say, there's a lot of people profiting out of my people's illness. See what I'm saying?
I do.
And then, will my people have access to this medication, if it ever came out? So, there's the kind of the value of making it as cheaply accessible as possible. So having a not-for-profit company, right, that manufactures this.
Yeah.
But then there's the other value of actually getting it out there as widely and rapidly as possible. And the for-profit companies have certainly got that these people know how to hustle, right? So they know how to push products to the market and get them out there. And for me, whereas I see my friends committing suicide, yesterday I got up and I was like, okay, I'm going to spend the whole day preparing for the talk with Michelle and Kyle, right? And what happens is I have 3 calls from 3 suicidal friends, right? this is what I
reality
have
of
for
your
breakfast.
Day to day. Yeah.
This is my reality. Yeah,
so
right.
heavy for me. I want to help so much.
Well, you are. Thank you. Really. So
it's so sad.
Yeah, and this is like how the hell I
get anything done is beyond me.
Well, how I try to, how I managed to not fall into despair. That's another, which I did. When the fourth personal friend of mine died from suicide. After, there were two within 1 month that I was really close to in London after my mum had died. And then I fell in, and then I got mugged and had a head injury. Then I was in despair and head injury land for 2 years. Didn't get anything done. So I'm trying to keep myself motivated. So if there's some for-profit hustler coming along, which one of these hedge fund people said to me, look, one of our main investors has a wife who's bipolar and is drunk ayahuasca and got benefits. So, maybe we can help you out. And it's like that kind of attitude I prefer, in a lot of ways, I would prefer to work with someone who's going to make millions of dollars out of this if it's going to get the medicine to my people quicker than working with university or working with a not-for-profit like MAPS who are going to take 20 years to do it, right? This is all really complicated things, and what is the ethical thing to do in all this? And the other thing is, if it was, I got to say this, I got to just put this out there, that the whole concept of pharmawaska, it's really, really controversial, and quite frankly, it is effectively biopiracy in the sense of it is taking an indigenous traditional medicine, turning it into a pill, selling it in the Western market. So there is something inherently wrong with that, there's a lot inherently wrong with that, unless there is a huge amount of the profits from that goes back to the Amazon. So the hedge fund guy said to me, well, hey, look, if you want to make a lot of money out of this, then you can give it to the Amazon, and that's cool with me, And I'm like, well, that is a possibility. I got to say, I want people to know my track record. So my track record, so I've been an activist for 30 years. So back in 1990, I worked for the anti-apartheid campaign. I met Nelson Mandela. When 1991, I ran a basically Occupy-style protest against the Gulf War in George Bush Sr. I then worked in feminist movement, men against sexual assault, got a degree in women's studies and so on. Then I ran the Peace Not War record label. And in that time, I was executive producer and produced 250,000 CDs of anti-war music at the time when George Bush and Tony Blair were bombing Afghanistan and Iraq, and gave all the money to peace groups, 100% of the profits, right? So that is my track record. I'm also the guy that spent 10 years negotiating with the Parliament of the World's Religions to get ayahuasca recognized as a legitimate religious practice. So I've got the Santo Daime, the UDV, and indigenous people. I had indigenous people singing Icaros on the main stage of the Parliament of the World's Religions a few years ago with, in front of 6,000 spiritual leaders from 200 religions around the world. So that was their intro to ayahuasca as a legitimate sacred medicine. So and, cool. That's the sort of thing, that's how I roll, right? And also I love indigenous culture from the Amazon. This is my religion, really. It's, gone from, I still practice the Santo Daime occasionally if I can find a church that I'm aligned with. And I also have gone deep into the indigenous traditions. And, for example, there was the Shakruna, another great crew, Shakruna. They had a debate recently between Leanna Standish and Victoria Hale, and it was a discussion. It was a friendly discussion. and then moderated by Joe Tafur, and then there was Miguel Chindoy and Diara Tucano on this panel. Now, Diara and Miguel are personal friends of mine, and I have things, sacred objects personally handed to me from those two people on my altar. And it is very deeply meaningful to me, the spiritual culture and wisdom of all these indigenous tribes in the Amazon. And I feel them. I feel what's going on for them. And, my company is by definition not for profit, but it will anyway. But if that got a lot of income from pharmawaska, then it would, I promise, give the majority of the profits to buying things, something like, buying forest in Brazil to stop the bloody cow farmers from, taking over, that sort of thing. Yeah. And so there's balancing the indigenous needs with balancing the bipolar people's needs. And some kind of, in a lot of ways, some alliance with for-profit companies or hybrid, as MAPS has now become a hybrid public benefit and not-for-profit, or sacred medicines has become a hybrid for-profit, not-for-profit. And there's another one, Plant Science, I think they're called, Panacea Plant Sciences, led by David Heldrick. So they're for-profit, but with reciprocity at its core, and 32% of their shares being owned by indigenous people. So,
wow, cool.
One of these kind of ways is like, they've got this business sense, which I quite frankly do not have. They know how to hustle and get things out to market. So those guys, it does make a lot of sense to collaborate with those in some way and somehow to keep intact my principles and to keep intact the sacredness of ayahuasca in all of this. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about the controversial topic of pharmawaska.
Thank you so much for going, so deeply into that. I don't think everyone, just thought about it I just hadn't thought about it from all those different angles, and you put it together so well. And also just this conversation about sacred reciprocity and how to start an ethical business could be so, useful to folks just outside of the pharmawaska industry, but just in the new psychedelic industry in general. Like, we need to be thinking about these things as we're starting organizations, and the way that you've clearly thought it out and have presented it, I think could help other folks think about this as well. So I really appreciate that, Benjamin. I think it's really valuable as we move forward, as an industry.
Thank you. And I must say, I've been taking the lead from people like, the Shakruna and Psychedelic Society and Rebel Wisdom and people like this who are really looking at these questions really carefully and intelligently. So I'm following their lead. Oh, and also what are they called? North Star. So I've signed the North Star Pledge, by the way. So, all these people are really looking at this, and it's not my area of expertise. So I'm following their lead, quite frankly, on these issues. Yeah. Now, there's one thing I haven't.
We got like 4 minutes. Let's real
4
quick.
minutes. Okay.
Sure.
4 minutes. Okay. So the other avenue is starting a church. So either a church in the United States, Spain, one of the Amazon countries, or perhaps Costa Rica, where basically it's a retreat center that's specifically for bipolar people to come, but it's more than a retreat center. It actually becomes a church where also the families of bipolar people whose daughter or loved one has died from suicide, that they can come along and they have their healing, and where a community is built and it's something like a protocol is followed, and there's something that was similar to the 12-step program for alcoholics, but it's like a whole sort of lifestyle package for bipolar people that involved a lot of a period of being on retreat, having healing ceremonies, but then also a protocol to take home and some pharmawaska or some freeze-dried ayahuasca to take home for maintenance, medication and stability and a support network and so on. So, I've got the domain name. It's the www.bipolar.church. So that's like a vision.
Yeah.
I don't know. And really I'm quite frankly, I'm better at playing guitar than I am at doing science. So, so that in a lot of ways, that's where my heart and soul goes. And in the meantime, I'm thinking I've got my PhD submitted hopefully in about 1 year. Then I have it remains unpublished for a year, so they won't put it in the public domain for a year. And during that year, so 2022 to 2023, in that year, I need to submit patent application, and for that, I need to raise the funds to do that and put in the patents because I've had patent officers already advise me that if I don't patent it myself, some pharmaceutical company will, and they'll nick my idea and put it out in a for-profit way without any integrity.
They definitely will.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what can I say? The moment I just need to finish my PhD, that's my priority, but I'm thinking in the long term. And in my absolute ideal situation would be for Dr. Bronner's or someone very similar to that to make like a catalytic investment where I had some autonomy, but they helped me out to get to this stage, finish my PhD, put in the patent. And then once the patent's there in the name of my not-for-profit, then could address whether that goes through, whether the studies, the clinical trials happen through a university or a for-profit company. And, that, and whatever it is, I promise that the interest of the bipolar people and the interest of the original owners of this technology, i.e. the indigenous Amazonians, will be the beneficiaries. That's my absolute promise to the community. So putting out a prayer now to the spirit of ayahuasca and to the community to somehow manifest a Zoom call with David Bronner. That's my absolute ideal next step. And that's, the path forward. And then for the next few years, and then we'll figure out, and I'm totally transparent about this, and I want the community to be involved. And anyone want to give me some advice, go to my website, send me an email, bipolardisorder.me. I'd really appreciate that. And, in humble service to bipolar people and in humble service to the spirit of ayahuasca, and in deep gratitude to Kyle and Joe and Michelle for letting me ramble for so long.
No, thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. If, there are folks listening that want to help you in any way, advice, sponsorship, donations. Yeah, your website, bipolardisorder.me is the best place, correct? And correct, I wish you the best of luck. I want to be able to support you as we can. This topic's also very near and dear to my heart. Yeah. I think ayahuasca chose you well, and I am very glad that it is you spearheading this. And I really just hope, that we can just, make the right mycelial connections to start making this a reality. I think it's possible. And I think that it could help so many people. And so just thanks again for sharing your vision with us so transparently. It actually is such a breath of fresh air, to be honest. And I feel just so good after these conversations. So thanks for all your hard work.
You're so welcome.
Yes, thank you, Benjamin.
No, de nada.
You really cheer me up. Give me a lot of optimism to keep going with this.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. And we'll catch you on the next episode. So thanks for listening, everybody. And thank you again, Benjamin, for joining and sharing all your wisdom with us.
Muchas gracias.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Benjamin Mudge. I know I did. I know Michelle did. Benjamin's doing some really awesome work, and just really excited to see how everything pans out with his research. I think it's super important that we need to get some treatment options out here for people that are struggling with bipolar and other disorders. And I know it's kind of a controversial topic, again, within this field, because a lot of people struggling with this disorder have been excluded from the research criteria. And, some people are taking into their own hands. Some people are having great benefit with it. There are risks involved. Other times it does cause more distress in somebody's lives. And again, right, if you need to get stabilized, you need to get grounded, and you feel like traditional approaches could be helpful, don't shy away from that. I think it's important to get help however you can. So again, if you want to check out Benjamin's website and work, you can check that out at bipolardisorder.me. And if you want to donate, there's a little tab there at the donate button, and go over to there and help Benjamin out, help him out with his research. We need it. We need it in this field. Yeah. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to email us at support@psychedelicstoday.com. And again, be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. And just want to thank everybody again. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the support over the years. Couldn't do it without you. So wishing everybody a beautiful week ahead, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Psychedelics Today.